possibility of a serious infantile paralysis epidemic, health authorities of the city of San Antonio, Texas, attacked the germ carriers throughout the city. With the war-discovered DDT in special sprayers, sections of the city are blanketed with the insecticide in the fight to stop the spread of the dread poliomyelitis. Every suspected spot is sprayed.
Against mosquitoes for about 3 months. The Africans at first are not very impressed. Some are afraid that the DDT will poison them, while others suspect some sort of witchcraft. Objections with eloquence. He says that the new medicine is a bad poison that may exterminate the whole tribe.
It begins with the war-born development of DDT. This diabolical weapon of modern science saved millions of humans, but killed billions of insects. Man, with this newly discovered force, has at long last gained the upper hand in our age-old struggle. The really heavy blow fell only a few months ago. It came from laboratories where top scientists from famous universities and from industrial and government organizations collaborated to develop something new and different. They succeeded. They perfected Pestroy, the most effective weapon man has ever wielded against insects. In both its forms, powder and liquid, Pestroy means doomsday to us insects. For this new insect destroyer contains a lot of DDT, not just a little. Its DDT content is even higher than government specifications. But the really sure kill feature of this insect killer isn't simply that it contains DDT, it's the way that it makes sure that bugs get the DDT that's in it. For example, take this liquid form, Pestroy DDT synthetic resin coating.
As surely as a German bullet, the disease-carrying insects that follow in the train of war. This is the story of that chemical. It stood guard over the lives of millions of soldiers. It helped the Allies win the Second World War. But in the 30 years since then, more battles have raged around the manufacture and use of this one substance than any other chemical compound. Today, it's still being made. But after a lifetime of confusion and controversy, the chemical that began its career so gloriously amid the drama of war is now banned from use in America, and it's under tight control in Britain, because it's said to threaten the survival of birds, of fish, and perhaps even of man himself. This chemical is DDT. For many people, DDT has become a symbol for environmental contamination and damage. But for some, it's just a living.
I don't think I'm making it.
You might end up killing many tens of thousands of people a year as a direct result of that.
And if the spray truck came down the street, they were told to just stay indoors for a few minutes and everything would be all right. So you had the government endorsing a product, and you had the chemical industry pushing it very aggressively.
There was a development program going on within the corporate system saying, well, if a little bit is good, a lot more is much better, isn't it?
So if I made a decision, or if there was a collective decision to do a geoengineering program, and you put, say, the kind of program I think makes more sense, we put about 1 million tons a year in, but let's say.
Public health departments staged demonstrations to convince the public of DDT's effectiveness and safety. Enthusiasm for the chemical knew no bounds, and few were questioning the wisdom of such use. Public places and private backyards were being treated whether people liked it or not. In 1957, planes sprayed a Massachusetts bird sanctuary owned by Olga Huckins, a friend of Carson's. In fury and desperation, Huckins told her what had happened. The birds showed all the symptoms typical of DDT poisoning. Huckins knew that the planes would be back, in spite of her protests. She asked Carson for help. Carson later remembered how the thought of a spring silent of birdsong had moved her to action.
It was your personal letter, in the course of finding that someone, that I realized I must write the book.
We have to remember that children born today are exposed to these chemicals from birth, perhaps even before birth. Now, what is going to happen to them in adult life as a result of that exposure? We simply don't know.
This is one of the nation's bestsellers, first printed on September 27, 1962.
In her groundbreaking book, Silent Spring, Rachel Carson jolted a prosperous post-war America, a country confident that science and technology were leading the way to a future in which disease and hunger could be overcome. In no small part thanks to a new generation of powerful pesticides. But in Silent Spring, Carson warned that progress had a price.
These sprays, dusts, and aerosols are now applied almost universally to farms, gardens, forests, and homes. Non-selective chemicals that have the power to kill every insect, the good and the bad, to still the song of birds and the leaping of fish in the streams. All this, though the intended target may be only a few weeds or insects.
Through sheer determination, Carson participated in an hour-long CBS News documentary on pesticides.
CBS reports The Silent Spring of Rachel Carson,
which aired not long after Silent Spring became a national bestseller.
Can anyone believe it is possible to lay down such a barrage of poisons on the surface of the earth without making it unfit for all life?
While Carson didn't contend that chemical insecticides must never be used, she faced harsh opposition.
A spokesman for the chemical industry, Dr. Robert White Stevens.
The major claims in Miss Rachel Carson's book, Silent Spring, are gross distortions of the actual facts, completely unsupported by scientific experimental evidence and general practical experience in the field. If man were to faithfully follow the teachings of Miss Carson, we would return to the Dark Ages, and the insects and diseases and vermin would once again inherit the earth.
And when CBS turned to government experts, the questions were many, but the answers few.
Dr. Paige Nicholson, water pollution expert, Public Health Service.
Do you know how long the pesticides persist in the water once they get into it?
Not entirely.
Do you know the extent to which our groundwater may be contaminated right now by pesticides?
We don't know that either, nor do we know if concentration may be occurring in groundwater.
There appears to be growing concern among scientists as to the possibility of dangerous long-range side effects from the widespread use of DDT and other pesticides. Have you considered asking the Department of Agriculture or the Public Health Service to take a closer look at this?
Yes, and I know that they already are. I think particularly, of course, since Ms. Carson's book, but they are.
In 1943, the first 6 pounds of DDT arrived in the United States. It was tested by various government agencies, and before the war was out, we were producing tons of it. Then after the war, the use of DDT expanded into agriculture, forestry, and commercial and residential. It was used in hospitals. It was used everywhere. The peak year for its use was 1959, when there were 80 million pounds of DDT applied in the United States. So, again, by the end of the 1950s, 1960s, DDT and a host of now other related insecticides that were chemically similar had come into really widespread use. In 1945, Rachel Carson learned that the Fish and Wildlife Service had been doing tests on DDT at the Patuxent Research Center in Maryland, which is very near where she lived in Silver Spring. And these tests indicated that DDT maybe wasn't as harmless to other forms of life as had initially been thought.
At his press conference on August 29, 1962, President Kennedy was asked,
There appears to be growing concern among scientists as to the possibility of dangerous long-range side effects from the widespread use of DDT and other pesticides. Have you considered asking the Department of Agriculture or the Public Health Service to take a closer look at this?
Yes, and I know that they already are. I think particularly, of course, since Ms. Carson's book, but they are examining the matter.
The presidential commission that Kennedy ordered, as I mentioned earlier, essentially confirmed that Silent Spring was correct. It didn't really have any enforcement authority at that point, so not a lot changed at first. But Carson was asked to testify before the United States Senate.
Biologist Rachel Carson, who also wrote The Sea Around Us, worked 4 years in the preparation of Silent Spring. What she wrote started a national quarrel.
Chemicals are the sinister and little recognized partners of radiation in changing the very nature of the world, the very nature of its life. These sprays, dusts, and aerosols are now applied almost universally to farms, gardens, forests, and homes. Can anyone believe it is possible to lay down such a barrage of poisons on the surface of the earth without making it unfit for all life? They should not be called insecticides, but biocides.
After her death from breast cancer in 1964, the environmental movement continued to pick up steam with Silent Spring as kind of one of its main touchstones. The formation of the EPA in 1970 by the Nixon administration was something that Carson and her colleagues had discussed for a long time as being something that the government needed to have. And then in 1972, among the first orders of business for the EPA was to ban DDT and about a dozen other closely related insecticides.